Ancient Greek hoplites are often imagined as heavily armored warriors, locked in rigid formations, pushing forward in a relentless wall of shields and spears. This image has dominated popular culture, but the reality of Greek warfare was far more complex. The Archaic period, 700 to 480 BC, saw the rise of the hoplite, a soldier equipped with a large round shield, aspis, a spear, dory, and body armor. This era witnessed some of the most legendary battles in history: Marathon, Thermopylae, and Plataea, where Greek warriors faced overwhelming odds and won through discipline, strategy, and adaptability. For years, historians described hoplite warfare as static, with two armies clashing in a brutal contest of strength, where formations interlocked and soldiers physically pushed against each other in a massive scrum, a concept known as Othismos. However, this interpretation is oversimplified. The term Othismos appears only a handful of times in ancient texts, and its meaning remains debated. While often translated as pushing, it could just as easily refer to the pressure of combat rather than a literal shoving match. The assumption that hoplites were weighed down by their armor, unable to move fluidly, is also misleading. The aspis shield, often imagined as a massive slab of bronze, was actually made primarily of wood with a thin bronze layer. This construction significantly reduced its weight, making it far more manageable in combat. Reconstructions show that a fully equipped hoplite carried around 18 to 22 kilograms, 40 to 48 pounds, of gear. While this was heavy, it did not make them sluggish or immobile. As Greek warfare evolved, so did their equipment. By the Persian Wars, hoplites began lightening their armor. Some abandoned bronze breastplates in favor of linen or leather, and many stopped wearing greaves altogether. This shift suggests an increasing emphasis on mobility rather than pure defense. Phalanx formations, often thought to be rigid and inflexible, were more dynamic than commonly assumed. Typically, Greek phalanxes were 3 to 4 ranks deep, rather than the massive, deep formations seen in later warfare. The frontline soldiers, known as promachoi, carried the best armor and shields, absorbing missile fire and leading the charge. Greek shields provided more coverage on the left side, causing soldiers to instinctively shift right to maximize protection. Over time, this small movement influenced how formations adjusted in battle. A common misconception is that Greek shields were linked together with ropes, restricting movement. However, such a setup would have made battlefield maneuvering nearly impossible. Instead, hoplites had roughly 70 to 90 centimeters, about 3 feet, of space to adjust, advance, and retreat when necessary. Greek tactics were not limited to simple forward charges. At the Battle of Plataea, the Spartans were described as fighting like cavalry, using feigned retreats to lure Persian forces into breaking formation before launching devastating counterattacks. This level of battlefield deception contradicts the idea of rigid, inflexible combat. Before battle, Greek armies performed pre-battle sacrifices known as sphagia to seek favor from the gods. Orders were relayed not by trumpets or signals, but through verbal communication, passed down the ranks. As armies approached, they often slowed down rather than charging recklessly, exchanging missile fire and engaging in psychological warfare, hurling taunts and battle cries to intimidate the enemy. The final engagement was not an immediate clash, but a controlled, strategic movement. The way hoplites wielded their spears is another area often misunderstood. While the underhand grip is commonly depicted, the overhand grip was the preferred method. This allowed warriors to strike downward, taking advantage of gaps in armor and keeping their spears effective even in tight formations. Modern riot police tactics and reenactments provide insight into the realities of hoplite combat. Despite standing in formation, hoplites were not static. They adjusted their positions, retreated, and reformed as needed, rather than simply pressing forward in a rigid mass. Greek battles were not prolonged, continuous engagements. Instead, they consisted of cycles, advancing, retreating, regrouping, and charging again when the moment was right. The real carnage didn't happen in the main clash, but during the rout. Once an army broke formation and fled, light infantry and cavalry would pursue, cutting them down as they ran. Once an army's formation collapsed, the battlefield transformed into chaos. The disciplined lines of the phalanx disintegrated, and those who turned their backs were doomed. Greek soldiers were trained to fight in formation, but once a rout began, individual survival instincts took over. Light infantry, often dismissed as secondary forces, became the deadliest hunters. Armed with javelins, slings, and short swords, they thrived in this phase of battle, cutting down exhausted and panicked hoplites who had thrown away their shields to flee faster. Cavalry, often underestimated in Greek warfare, played a critical role here, riding down stragglers and preventing the enemy from regrouping. Victory in Greek warfare wasn't just about breaking the enemy line. It was about ensuring they could never rally again. Chasing down fleeing soldiers served both a practical and psychological purpose, ensuring that a defeated enemy would not return for a second fight. The aftermath of battle was just as brutal. Fallen warriors were stripped of their armor, which was too valuable to leave behind. Greek custom dictated that the winning side would set up a tropeion, a battlefield trophy made from captured enemy weapons and shields, marking the site of their victory. Only after the victors had secured the battlefield would they allow the losing side to retrieve their dead. For the surviving hoplites, the battle didn't end when the fighting stopped. The long march home awaited, sometimes over hundreds of miles, carrying wounds, exhaustion, and the knowledge that many of their comrades would never return. This was the true nature of Greek warfare, far from the rigid, brute force clashes so often imagined. It was a system of maneuver, discipline, deception, and relentless pursuit, where victory was determined not just by the initial charge, but by the chaos that followed.